Welcome, everyone, and I'm looking forward to today's session. That opening intro song, very gladiator style, very dramatic. Thanks for getting that set up for us. I'm joined here on today's webinar. We're going to be focusing on how AI helps sellers cut through the noise. Got three amazing panelists and friends, colleagues. We've been working together for some time now and really excited to hear their views. So joining me today here is Ted McKenna, Matt Dixon, and Tony Gilbert. Ted's the founding partner of DCM Insights, a customer understanding lab focused on using data and research-backed frameworks to help companies attract, engage, retain, and grow customer relationships. Prior to co-founding DCMI, Ted held numerous executive leadership positions in product strategy research, advisory and enablement for Tether, Russell Reynolds, and CEB, which is now a part of Gartner. Ted's a co-author of The Jolt Effect, How High Performers Overcome Customer Indecision, and is a speaker and advisor to sales and customer experiences teams around the world. Matt has held executive leadership positions in product research and consulting, also with Tether and Korn Ferry and CEB, where he ran the Global Sales and Service Research Group. Matt's the author of 3 Amazon and Wall Street Journal bestsellers. Many folks are very familiar with The Challenger Sale, The Effortless Experience, and also The Challenger Customer. He's also a frequent contributor to Harvard Business Review, and he is also the co-author with Ted on The Jolt Effect, which was released last September. And last but not least, Tony is an experienced sales leader with nearly 30 years in enterprise sales, starting from IBM in the 90s to BMC in the early 2000s to his current role at Databricks, where he's leading the largest industry vertical in communications, media, and entertainment vertical globally. And Databricks is one of the fastest growing enterprise software companies of all time, and probably likely to go public at some point in the coming year or two. And when they do, probably be one of the largest IPOs ever. So a fantastic group of panelists. Really looking forward to today's conversation. Just to kick us off with an icebreaker, I'm going to ask you each just to identify which actor you would choose to be the voice of your own AI chatbot. Maybe you can start, Ted, and then go to Matt, Tony.
Oh, perfect, because I came up with 2 just in case somebody stole one of mine, but now I'm going first, so that's not a risk. So I'm going to go with Tom Hanks. You know, it's a Mr. America, also a great voiceover guy in general as Woody, so I feel like that's a solid choice.
Solid. Good choice. That was a good choice. So there's something they say on about when you order in a restaurant, the worst position to order from is last. So this is Tony. That's going to be you here, because then you just regret your choice after you hear what everyone else has ordered. So I also picked 2 because I thought I wasn't going to. It was mainly because I was indecisive, but I also thought there was a risk somebody would steal mine. So I was torn between 2 Wills. Will Ferrell, which I thought would be pretty funny, but then Willem Dafoe, who's I'm a big fan of, and I think just has an interesting voice. So I think that would be give me shivers at least every time I heard the chatbot talking to me. So comforting.
That's hilarious, guys. Actually, those weren't my choices. The other day I listened to Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey on Audible. And I got to tell you, like no less than 10 times, I thought, man, that guy's got a good voice. And I'm recently married, so if I had that voice instead of my voice, I'm pretty sure I would still keep my wife. So I'm going to go with Matthew McConaughey today.
Solid choices. I'll add to that with Morgan Freeman. I think we've got some great actors we could choose from, or actresses. We actually chose no actresses. I'm sure we've got a backup option there. So I know we're relatively short on time. I'm going to try and run this as quickly as possible. We've got some great research to share in a short while. Many of you probably already familiar with this topic, but let me just get the stage set with everything that's been happening around generative AI over the last year. And one of the earliest studies around the impact of sales or just productivity on knowledge workers was a study that came out in September of this year, and it looked at around 750 consultants at BCG, typically involved in about 18 activities. What I thought was particularly interesting was that when the cohort who were using ChatGPT were tested against the cohort that weren't using ChatGPT, the ones that did use it were 25% faster in all of those activities, and they had 40% higher quality, which really unlocks a huge opportunity then for productivity for all knowledge work overall. what I thought was probably even more interesting was that the bottom 50% of performers actually overachieved the higher achievers. So really the opportunity for using LLMs, using generative AI overall in knowledge work is very, very significant, just based on the initial study here. The one thing that the study did cite was that on some tasks, AI is immensely powerful, and on others, it fails completely or subtly. And unless you use AI a lot, you may not know which is which. And so just with that backdrop, what's been happening in the world of sales over the last 1 year is obviously there's been a lot of interest and use of productivity tools like AI. But one of the things that we've seen so far is that sales productivity has been declining. We see that with lower growth. We see that with lower quota attainment. And so that's been one of the major challenges that we need to work through. So with that backdrop, I'd love for Ted, if I can hand over to you to present and represent the research that was done recently around these topics. It'd be great to hear from you first as you walk through that, and then we'll open up to a roundtable format with some Q&A with Matt and Tony.
Sure. Yeah, and I think the title of this slide kind of tells the story. I think so many of us are frustrated with some of the maybe not gains we're looking for from a productivity standpoint, and the sales to customer interactions feels too often grounded in that old spray and pray type approach, and that's coming through to buyers in a way that's very frustrating for them. This is recent research from a study that Gong did about the state of sales engagement. And I think some of these aren't surprising, but as you double click into each one of them, it tells, I think, a pretty interesting and troubling story about the state of the engagement with between seller and buyer. So on the left-hand side, you'll see 13% of buyers, only 13% of buyers agree that the seller's message is addressing a relevant challenge that my organization is facing. So you think about what that means is the seller isn't coming in with any sort of perspective on what's relevant right now for me and for my organization. So there's a timing component to this on which we're missing. We're just going in blind, assuming every buyer is ready to buy our thing right now. That's a really low number, 13%. But look at the middle at 25%. Only 25% agree that the seller understands my role within the organization. Again, implying a lack of understanding both of my organization, who are the people in the organization, where do they sit, the role they play, and also myself individually. What do I care about? How do I fit into the picture? Only a quarter of buyers feel that sellers are doing that, despite all the tools and information available to them, more so than ever before. And yet only a quarter of buyers feel as if they're being engaged in a way that reflects an understanding of their business. And I think making matters even more complex, as you see on the right-hand side, more and more executives, more and more and bigger teams. We know this. The size of purchasing teams has only grown over time, and that complexity is reflected, I think, in the way in which sellers are engaging and not recognizing, again, where does everyone kind of fit into that picture. So we know sellers are kind of struggling to break through that noise in those engagements, and buyers are quite frustrated. I mean, we interview buyers all the time, and you could feel it, and it comes through. We'll talk about some of the studies that we did, and some of the verbatims were just quite funny, actually, in some ways to read through. Just the color under which they would share that frustration. Now, as we think about how do we go about moving from where we stand today to a place that actually does resonate with buyers, we know personalization really matters quite a bit. Now, I think conceptually, that's not news. Like, we know in general that the ability for that seller to tailor the message to the person and to the organization is always going to increase that resonance. One of the recent studies that we did was surveying a number of different executives, C-suite executives across the different C-suite functions. So CTO, CFO, CSO, CMO, all of them, and tried to ask them a bunch of questions about different messages that would resonate and what about them did resonate. And you can see the vast majority of them agreed that personalization increases the likelihood they open the message and actually respond to it. Again, not all that surprising. What I think is powerful, but also a worthy reminder, is what's happening on the right-hand side is the role that data plays in that story. The fact that data makes it more likely that they're going to open and respond, and it makes a big influence on their decision. Now, why might that be? Beyond the obvious that data is interesting and useful, I think this gets to the heart of the trust story going on with buyers, is they're looking for verified and verifiable information. I don't necessarily trust what this person might say subjectively, so data being more objective, it makes it more valuable. Now, as we dive back into the study that we did, again, we surveyed buyers. We also interviewed a whole bunch of sellers. We also were able to, as we partnered with the Databook organization, view the data usage and preferences of thousands of sellers. So we can really get a wide view of what works and also what doesn't work. And what you're seeing here on this slide is an example of something that doesn't work. This is an example of a communication that we found buyers are quite frustrated with. Now, this is just an example piece of outreach, but as I read through it, I think you'll get a sense for why buyers do just dismiss this type of outreach. You know, I don't think this will be a surprising statistic, but I think was it HubSpot or something had a study at one point that the average response rate for email these days is like 1%, which I don't think anyone would be surprised about, but because we get emails like this and it can be very frustrating. So as you read through it, Drake, is your team struggling with low customer engagement rates due to the inability to deliver highly personalized experiences? Would you be interested in learning how organizations like ServiceNow, Salesforce, and Intel are increasing win rates by 12.5% by delivering highly personalized customer experiences? Leveraging our AI-powered solutions, we're able to help your team deliver highly personalized customer experiences across all channels, leading to an increase of 2.6x pipeline and 12.5% higher win rates. Worth exploring how you can deliver these outcomes for your team. I think it's funny when I first saw this email, just how many times they say personalized. I think it's just like if I say the word personalized more often, it will feel personalized. But it's kind of ironic because, of course, it's not very personalized. It feels rather robotic. And that's what we heard from buyers when we surveyed them on an outreach like this, is it feels like you're selling with a template, right? It feels very robotic. It doesn't recognize what might be happening inside that organization, what Drake himself might care about at that moment. There's no mention of anything that might make this more timely in nature. And they're just saying banal things like, wouldn't you love higher win rates? Well, of course, I'd want higher win rates, but this is probably one of, I mean, Tony can probably attest to this as a buyer, one of 100 different emails you might get saying something like this in a given day. So yes, you want to increase win rates, but that doesn't mean I think you as a supplier are going to be the difference maker for that. Now, as you think about how do we get better at this, what does a better version of outreach look like? We know a lot of that comes down to you demonstrating, oops, we have a issue with the title on the slide, apologies for that, comes down to your ability to demonstrate a deep understanding of that buyer's business. This is something we've known for a long time. Matt and I have been researching sellers for 20 years, and it's always been true from the very first moments when we started researching them, is that pre-call prep was a distinguishing characteristic of high performers. We know they dedicate outsized time to preparing, and not just for calls, but also, of course, for outreach like this. The question is, how do we speed that up? And what you see here, the difference with a high performer email is, you're using that preparation, it's coming through inside of the content of that communication. So here's one example. Buyers responded much better to outreach like this. I'll read through the whole email, and then we'll have a couple of call outs. So Janice, on your Q1 earnings call, Kelly Smith highlighted the importance of extreme focus on net new customer acquisition and how that will help achieve your 19% revenue growth goals in the next fiscal year. However, over the last 12 months, your revenue growth rate was only 7% and the second lowest in your peer group. A recent Forrester research report indicated many enterprises struggle to deliver personalized experiences across multiple touch points, hurting pipeline creation and weakening net promoter scores. Leveraging AI-powered engagement modules, TechSync Solutions empowers ServiceNow, IBM, and Salesforce to provide personalized experiences and seamlessly engage customers across various channels, leading to 3.2x bigger pipeline creation and 21% more revenue growth. We identified an opportunity to drive $34 million in incremental revenue, helping you reach your 12% growth goal. When's a good time to discuss this live? Now, you can see the contrast is pretty stark, but let's call out a couple of key differences here. You'll see that first one in the pink highlighted text at the top. It's very clear the seller has done their homework on the organization, but also on specific key buying committee members. So this person's writing to Janice, but they're referencing Kelly Smith and specifically what this person has talked about on an earnings call. So they're using, again, verified and verifiable information to be able to demonstrate their understanding. Let's go to the next slide for the next call out. They're referencing goals that are specific to this company. So it's tailored in that nature, but it's also then justifying a little bit of the timing of this outreach. We'll talk about in a minute why that's so powerful. Let's go to the next slide here. Context around how they compare to peer companies, second lowest in your peer group. So I'm referencing other ways in which you've helped other companies, and then using that as context for here's where we see you fit into that picture. And then last one on the next slide. It addresses their need for multi-channel solution. So it's again justifying the solution that I'm about to propose to you fits with something that we know you're trying to do. And so this isn't just coming out of left field. There's a purpose and there's a plan behind the reason I'm reaching out to you. So very, very different. Now, look, outreach is what it is. You're not always going to get huge response rates for any type of outreach, but you can see the thought that this person put into this. And this is why you end up hearing from buyers. If you were to ask them, compare side by side, which one are you more likely to reply to? It's definitely going to be something like this that demonstrates their deep understanding. Now, again, we know that getting to that often requires a lot of time for that seller to dedicate to that type of research, and also knowledge about where to go and find that type of information. I think one of the most exciting parts about where technology is going and where AI-driven platforms like Databook and others are helping sellers is it's fast cycling a lot of the homework that they might need to do in ways that are really, really powerful and not only save seller time, but also make it far more likely they're going to find the right pieces of information such that they can surface that inside of communication. So when we studied these high performers as part of these studies that we did, we found a pattern about the type of information that those high performers were going and finding and then inserting into communications. And it kind of fell into 3 different buckets you can see here on this page. The first type of information that they're looking for is information that helped to demonstrate that there is a fit here. There's a match between me as a supplier, me as a seller, and you as a customer and as a buyer, right? That there's justification that we work well with companies like you. There's reasons why we should, start dating, if you will, if not get married. And this is, I think, particularly valuable in situations when you're using, again, verified and verifiable information, even better if it's their own data that you're referencing. So financial reports or recent news items that indicate the intent of senior leadership. Conversational AI platforms and others are really good now at surfacing indications of buyer intent, explicit mentions and patterns of organizations over time. There's ways that you can, again, use actual interactions and data from those organizations to recognize what's going on inside of their company. AI-powered summaries of investor calls, verbatims. When we talk to high-performing sellers, they love using verbatims from those quarterly calls that they can use and reference in those situations. Again, all you're trying to do here is establish that there's a strategic fit between those 2 organizations, between your organization and the buyer organization. All right, next one over, personal value. Oops, sorry, thank you. Next one over is on personal value. So this is helping them understand the motive behind why now, right? It's saying this is valuable not just for your organization, but for you individually as part of your job, as part of your role, even potentially personally as part of your career. And so this here, you're using other types of platforms. LinkedIn, for example, has got first-party data, firmographic data, ways you can kind of paint a picture of an entire organization, who fits in where, what roles do they have, what functions do they have, and how does this person kind of fit into that story. There are platforms that build business cases that reflect investor sentiment or board priorities. News alerts or even recommendations for sharing things to certain people, given their role, given their priorities that they might have. Again, you're trying to personalize this for the individual and for the organization as best you can, really making sure that you're helping them understand this is worthwhile for you to go and do. And then the last one here, of course, the time spent justification. This is really about the timing of it all. right? That look, buying can be very difficult. It can take months or hopefully not years, but certainly a big chunk of time for this individual to go make the case or go get that deal through procurement or get through legal. It's got to be worth their while, right? And that means it's got to be worth their while now. So there's corroboration, hopefully third-party corroboration, that this is a worthwhile spend of their time, right? So if you can get to information like third-party analysts, for example, that are going to help to highlight the value of these solutions or the urgency of addressing this now. Using Gen AI to work through public documents or investor calls to spot timing, time-sensitive priorities that an organization might have. Statements that they're making, public statements that they're making, again, to investors in quarterly calls and what have you, indicate growth priorities or, again, potential time-sensitive things. You're really trying to help them understand what's the justification for addressing this now and not next year. Now, again, often this is one of your first pieces of outreach. You're not going to use this as a way to holistically convince them that change is necessary right now. You're just trying to pique their interest enough such that it allows you an opportunity to extend that conversation, or at least across several conversations, to be able to again, make that case for change. So again, just 3 different ways in which we see high performers looking for data that helps them to speed up and make their communications a lot more effective. Now, what's super exciting as we think about moving forward and using technology as a way to prompt and improve our interactions with customers is technology is getting to the point where it's much more proactive in nature. It doesn't require the seller thinking through, okay, I need to get better at understanding this organization, or I need to spend more time on Monday morning finding all this information. It's going to prompt them. So if we go to the next slide, this is an example of sort of a nudge that's coming through, in this case, in Slack. And there's, of course, other messaging platforms that you could be using here. But this is really AI powering the type of homework that we'd hope the seller might do, and doing it for them, and really nudging them in ways that makes it very easy for them to push play and make it their own. So, for example, you can see here on the September 6th Q2 earnings call, Jane Smith emphasized the importance of their initiatives to scale with efficiency in their go-to-market capabilities. This is an opportunity to demonstrate how Acme Company can help drive scale and efficiencies within their go-to-market teams by increasing the number and quality of C-suite conversations. Send this outreach to the below key stakeholders within the sales buying group to align Acme Company as a tool that can help the company execute on its strategic priorities. And then it lists 3 specific people and their roles. You see the hyperlink there, of course, is it makes it easy for them to go and verify this is the specified audience where we know this is going to resonate, right? At the top, Jane Smith, it's tailored background relevant to the specific company. So this person recently emphasized the importance of this initiative. So timing is there. They've scripted the outreach. But the seller, of course, can easily modify that in their own voice. This doesn't require that seller to act scripted or templatized, but they're starting from a place that is going to resonate, and then they can improve it from there. And then again, the proactive nudge that's coming through using AI, of course, is specifying the audience where this will resonate. There's less guesswork involved in terms of who might this be applicable to. So it's super exciting. It's just one example amongst many of the way in which technology is supercharging this type of homework, making it more proactive in nature, and therefore more likely for it to happen for that average seller.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Ted. Really, really interesting research. And I think as some of the comments have come through, I think a lot of folks resonate with that. I think getting to one of the points in there around how do you get the EQ to match up with the IQ. I think you talked about that through the personal value and getting to motivations at the individual level. I think, of course, those are just examples of emails, but there's never some silver bullet perfect scripted email. And even then, it's really more of your point of view for how you as an individual are going to go and engage with a customer. And that doesn't need to be through an email. It could be through a call. It could be a face-to-face meeting. So really great. Now I'm going to open it up to Matt and Tony. So maybe I'll go straight to Matt if you don't mind. So you guys spotted the importance of pre-call prep and tailoring a long time ago. Maybe can you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, gosh, if I go in the way back machine, and I think about, there was a study we ran, Ted and I were a part of many years ago at CEB, which is now part of Gartner Group, as you mentioned before on, it was called Shifting the Performance Curve. And we really looked at how do we learn from the behaviors, the time spent habits, et cetera, of high performers, use those insights to then create a tide that lifts all boats. And that's been kind of a general theme across all of our work, whether it was the Challenger sale or more recently the Jolt effect. I think one of the things that stood out to us in that work is if you look at a heat map of where you break down sales into, customer facing, non-customer facing, things that salespeople do and spend time on, and you get pretty detailed into that time spent breakout, and you sort of step back and you look at where are the areas that high performers overweight their time and where are the areas where average performers overweight their time. And this probably won't surprise anybody. Tony, I don't think it's going to surprise you at all, is that high performers spend a lot more time researching opportunities, doing that due diligence up front, and in prepping, right? So that they're prepared when they reach out to a prospect or a client, so that they're prepared when they have that first sales interaction or that second or third sales interaction, right? But they're doing that background work so they can go in and do that personalization and that tailoring so that their efforts resonate and stick a lot more effectively. Average performers, we found, tend to get bogged down. They spend a lot less time on this, and so they kind of resort to the spray and pray approach, especially as they fall behind goal. But I think they do get bogged down in kind of administrivia, right? It's like chasing invoices, and it's updating CRM, and it's a lot of the things that you create these time sucks for salespeople that your average performers tend to kind of fall into. We also found this in the Challenger sale work, which I know a lot of folks are familiar with. You remember Challengers do, those who know the book will remember Challengers do three things that make them different. They teach the customer something new about their business. Hard to do that when you haven't done your research and due diligence about the customer's business. They also tailor that message to the customer, to their context, to their industry, to the dynamics in the competitive landscape, the region they might be operating in, et cetera. And so, again, we see this idea of tailoring being one of these things that is part and parcel of high performance when we look at sales. And I think as Ted said, the reality is if you look at this stuff, we all kind of know it's right answer, right? We've been circling around this for a long time. The latest research kind of confirms this. And as Ted said, this is, I think, a moment where something that was kind of the provenance of high performers that they carved out time to do now becomes something that every seller can take advantage of. It's not that the average seller doesn't know they should be doing this stuff. They do. It's just that they don't have time to do it, and then they kind of fall behind, and then it's spray and pray mode, and I'm going to compete on volume, basically. So.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, Matt. I totally get it around the fact that we've been talking about this for over a decade or longer, and yet it's so hard for individuals to do. So hopefully the AI can help. Maybe, Tony, you can give some examples, real world experience. You've seen, you've managed hundreds of sellers in the past and thousands maybe. Can you share some thoughts?
No, absolutely. It goes along with what Matt and Ted have been talking about. And the Challenger sales, just seminal work on what I've seen my entire career. And that's the A players, the folks that, care most are the ones that spend the most amount of time, the ones that have the most amount of pride, spend the most amount of time to make sure they're tailoring the message, they're coming in with a strong point of view. And, our relationship with Databook, is over 5 years now with Databricks. And it's completely changed our view. We're customer obsessed at our company. What we are looking to do is come in with a strong point of view as to how data and AI can help that customer. And in an area of noise, and everybody, including my parents, are talking about data and AI. It's crazy. So it's a lot of noise. And to be able to get past that noise, it always comes down to value and what you can do for people specifically. And we try to avoid this concept of, and I talk about this ad nauseum with my team, this concept of seller deficit disorder, where people don't listen to the customer. They want to tell them what's going on, and they lead with a really strong point of view, but yet they're not listening to the client. And now there's all kinds of signals to listen to clients before you even meet with them, and all the data is there. So by leveraging, like I said, I think Databook has made a massive difference because it put all this information at our fingertips, and now there's no excuse. Yeah. Now it's a question if you want to do it right or don't do it right. So we did run an A/B test. And we continually run this. Those are who actually tailor the message correctly, leveraging AI coming from Databook, along to what Ted said, bringing in a fit and kind of crafting that message correctly allows us to build a very strong point of view and an idea that allows us to get to CEOs. And we've gotten pretty much, if you look at media entertainment, about 85% of the CEOs, and I'm talking some pretty big names, just think about any media company in the United States and the world. We do this to be able to get to that level. And then what we do is we enable and train our folks to believe in the point of view. You have to believe in it, right? And I remember very vividly when I was early in my career, one of my mentors said to me, always sell as if the CEO is sitting to your left in there, their CEO, not yours, their CEO. And so that you can go ahead and always leverage, this is your true north. This is what the CEO is trying to do. And what would they say in this meeting to help them out? And if you can't impact that agenda, there's other things that people sell and stuff, but maybe your stuff isn't that valuable, right? Yeah. And so give it the respect it deserves. So that's what we're doing. And we see a tremendous impact on those folks that make it happen. And I tell you, their W-2s are about 100% greater than the ones that don't. It's that simple, if not more,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tony, for sharing that. So just in terms of the timing, we've got about sort of 12-ish minutes. We had some pre-seeded questions from the community. So I'm going to maybe just pick on one or two of them and then go to some of the ones that have just come in live whilst we're in here. So one of the questions was, in a world of AI-generated noise, how can sellers use AI to separate themselves and their company's message? Maybe Matt, if I can turn to you, maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because there's been, you said this before, and there's so much coverage, there's so much buzz around this technology, and it feels like it's come up so quickly, right? And it's really changing the entire dialogue we're having around sales effectiveness and customer engagement. I think there's sort of a dark side to all this too, which is, these technologies used in the wrong way can actually accelerate or make worse the kind of spray and pray motion that many of us experience on a daily basis. I got like 100 of these inbounds in my email and my email inbox like today that I need to go through and delete. But used for the right purposes, I think it's what Tony's saying. It helps us do that legwork that every single salesperson knows is the right thing to be doing, but most salespeople don't spend the time doing it because think about it, like you've got to have a lot of confidence to carve out like the Jerry Maguire approach, like fewer clients, more deals, right? I'm going to convert at a higher rate. I'm going to generate more stickiness, more engagement, better conversion rate. But I'm confident enough in my sales skills that when I do that homework and I reach out to that customer with that tailored outreach, and when I do the homework, my value prop, my message is going to stick, and it's going to convert at a higher rate, at a higher price point, faster, et cetera. Like we all know this stuff, but it takes a lot of guts to actually carve out the time to do it. And I think when you remember you shared earlier on that the insight from the consulting study, right?
Yeah.
And how more effective and productive consultants were who were using Gen AI to speed up a lot of the work that has been historically manual. Let me give you a real quick example here. We this, we published some recent research. We looked at professional services partners and their business development effectiveness. So these are doer sellers, right? These are people who are selling engagements to clients and then executing on the work. So it's a bit of a different GTM motion than selling technology in some of the other products that folks on the live stream sell day in and day out. So it's a little bit of a different motion, so keep that in mind. But these folks also discovered the very best rainmakers in law and accounting and consulting, investment banking, learned that it's that upfront prep and due diligence that allows you to go out and create that tailored engagement with the client. We ran into a partner who runs a state and local tax division or practices in one of the biggest law firms in the world. And he told us, and this is no kidding, he told us that every Friday he's up at like 4 a.m. and he's reading with his own eyes and taking notes on a mountain of state and local tax court decisions. So he can go through those and think about who are the clients in my network, in my patch, who I might be able to reach out to with a tailored outreach based on a court decision that might have an impact on their business, right? He does that physically, and he's done it for years, and it's led to his outsized performance relative to many of his peers in this firm, which is amazing. The average partner looking at that is like, I'm not going to do that. There's just like, life is too short. I can't get to it. I'm behind my number anyway. I just got to go, right? But if you can use technology to compress that, like there's no reason in today's day and age that a human being should be doing that kind of work, right? And for you to leverage this technology, it's almost like Gen AI, high performers figured out how to get to the mountaintop, and Gen AI installed an elevator for everybody else, right? And that's what I think is so powerful. So I think for a seller, back to the question here, to not take advantage of this, you're putting yourself at a huge disadvantage, a huge productivity disadvantage, a conversion rate disadvantage, a competitive disadvantage in the market. So obviously right and wrong ways to use it, but get out there, try it, experiment with it. And I think to Tony's own experience, you'll be pleased with some of the results that you see personally.
I think what you don't want to do is use this as a crutch to replace just parts of your job that you just don't like, or maybe like. I think relying on AI just as a way to just blanket write your communications is a bad approach. I think about this almost as like, remember the Matrix, when they sort of upload in the back of their head, like all of a sudden now I can fly a helicopter, right? This is using technology as a way to make you smarter, right? And just making that more efficient. Sure. And then you can use that, of course, in lots of different ways. And if you want to use AI as a way to get the first draft of those communications, sure, why not? Speed that up, but just be careful about using it as a crutch.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's very interesting to sort of hear those examples there, Matt, you mentioned, and to your point then, Ted, as well. Yeah, this is not a crutch. This has got to be something that's part of the flow and something you own and you can then take forward and accountable for. Maybe a question for you then, Tony, just building on that. What would you say to a seller right now that is maybe reluctant to embrace or really integrate AI into their sales process?
Well, it's happened last week, and I always say, just don't fall behind. Doctors go to medical school, and you never want to go to a doctor who decided not to read a book or keep up 20, 30 years later. I mean, you wouldn't go to a doctor like that, and you're going to fall behind in the world that we live in. Is AI powered in many ways and augmented. And so if you're not keeping up, you're going to sound like everybody else, and you're going to be relegated selling commodity type of stuff with very little value with one buyer that, quite frankly, it's arguable if those types of jobs are going to be around the next 5 to 10 years for salespeople, right? Yeah. We exist because we can bring extreme value to clients, and we understand how to work, the politics, the different folks and different constituents to bring humans together, because people still buy from people they like and trust and justify it logically. But if you can't really help them justify it, then you're really going to be left out.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Just to pile on there, or not to pile on, but to pile on, I would say I love the don't be left behind. And I think a good thought, a question for sellers to ask themselves is, you may be reluctant and maybe you're unsure how to approach this and how to leverage it and so on and so forth. You're looking at the water, you're wondering if it's warm. But you got to think about this while you're reluctant. What if your competitor is using this technology and is, you are putting you're putting yourself at a big disadvantage, as Tony said.
Yeah, I think it also helps to demystify AI. AI, the word AI, of course, is used now to describe all sorts of different type of technology. But I think at core, what we're talking about here is unstructured text and information that was for so long very difficult to mine for value. And so now we have technology as a way to make sense of lots of unstructured data and make predictions. And so it's like unstructured text predictions. That seems like a good thing. Now, just of course, be careful about the way in which you use it, but to ignore its value, I think, is a mistake.
Totally agree.
Bob Britton makes a great comment in the chat. He says that you may not lose your sales job to AI yet, but you probably will lose your sales job to someone else who is using AI. And that's a lot to what we're talking about here. So we've got just maybe one more question. I'm gonna throw it over to you, Ted, if that's okay. And I can tell. So we can see that maybe a lot of outreach. Let's just say a lot of people are going to start using AI to improve their personalization. Let's say now we're looking forward 24 months. And so a lot of folks are now using this, having done the homework, they've then now reduced the kind of spam. If a Gen AI is unlocking all this ability, will it still have the same impact?
Yeah, I mean, I think the implication here, of course, is that if everyone's doing good homework, how can I still separate myself? Which I think is only fair if you assume that the only reason people aren't replying is because it doesn't reflect their homework. I mean, let's also recognize that the timing of the solution matters, and that's one of the reasons why you saw so much of the right answer here was looking for verified and verifiable information. This isn't my opinion. This was in a third-party analyst. This is in your investor calls. And so you're using that as justification more so than anything else. And that's not, you don't just invent that, right? That either exists or it doesn't. And so I think as long as you're relying on some of that type of verified information, again, all you're trying to do, I think, is pique their interest enough. This isn't, you're not going to create a sale over one single email, right? But I think timing is still going to matter quite a bit. And I think that'll be true 5 years from now and 10 years from now.
I agree.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of comments here in the chat channel. We're not going to be able to get to all of these, unfortunately, today, but I think there's been a lot of good discussion here. I actually forgot to introduce myself at the beginning of the call. I'm the co-founder CEO of Databook. We've been working closely with Matt and Ted and Tony and Databricks for some time now. And one of the things we wanted to give as an early reveal here was what we're sort of trying to do to address the opportunity of using AI in sales. And so we are launching in the new year Databook GPT. Welcome to go to the hyperlink here. Matt can put that in the chat channel, databook.com/GPT. One of the things we're recognizing is it's really important to be in the place where sellers work, whether that's in Slack or it's in Teams or it's in text messaging, in the places where they often work and spend their time, giving them the insights that they need. But it has to be really, really trusted. And I think from the research that we found earlier on, we presented, one of the things that we can see right now is we don't yet trust fully the LLMs or the chat GPTs. It has to be specific, personalized, it has to be within the context of your organization, it has to be verifiable with real-time data sets without the hallucination. So that's one of the things we've been spending a lot of time on, making sure our training models are really up to date and using the latest up-to-date information. In addition to that, it goes beyond just being able to give the trusted insights, but proactively nudging. I think Ted did a good example of how to show that proactive nudge, both in an individual level or in a team-based selling environment as well. One of the comments I think that came through was how does marketing really play a role in this type of account-based messaging? And it really should be the combination integration, not just with marketing and sales, but also with customer success teams, everyone working from the same data set around what's happening with customers around key account changes. And then the third is, like, it's great to know what happened. You want to know what to do about it. And we saw some examples of how you can then get personalized emails, narrative talking points, even automated sales decks. And that's things that we've been doing for quite some time. It's now really directly available in the places where sellers work. So go to databook.com/GPT if you're interested in signing up for the private preview of that. You can join the waitlist. So that brings us to a close for today's webinar. Really wanted to say a massive thank you to Ted and Matt for the research, and thank you for walking us through that today. Thank you so much, Tony, for joining us today, and congrats again on your getting married last weekend.
It's real, not AI. It's real.
It's real.
Yeah, very recent.
There are some places here you can find Tony, Ted, and Matt on LinkedIn and connect with them. And we also have links to the HBR article that Ted and Matt published recently. So thanks everyone for joining us, and wishing you a great weekend and happy holidays, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Anand.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Take care.